Okay, You Bet neighbors. Welcome to our special edition of Shelter in Place. And this is a discussion that we're going to kind of walk through a roundtable where we'll all have a conversation. And then, as I just mentioned, I'll be sharing some information that has been compiled through a variety of data sources, including CAL FIRE, FEMA, a bunch of fire scientists, et cetera, who have studied fires and identified the survivability of various options. So we're going to share that. And then we're going to talk about kind of those findings and if that impacts any of your plans. And then we're going to do a bit of a deep dive on shelter in place / stay and defend. And then I also have some information to share regarding zones of last resort, and we'll allow for conversation all the way through it. But that's kind of the format. It's going to be sort of the 3 levels. And first, tell me if you can, since Rich, you're right on top. Are you seeing it full screen right now?
Yes, we are.
So my question then becomes, how do I, guess I can't share screen and run all of the commands at the same time. So as we kind of kick this off, the disclaimer. So everything we've been doing in You Bet is designed around making our community more fire adapted and making ourselves, have a higher likelihood of survival. But I think we all know that the only surefire way to survive is to evacuate, and obviously early if possible. So that's just this disclaimer as we enter into this conversation. I am not a fire scientist. I'm not a first responder. So what I'm just sharing today is the best practices from all of the resources, like I said, not only in the US, but some of the key countries that face wildfires as well. So welcome. Our objective here is to really figure out what are the options that we have if we can't evacuate. And there's a variety of scenarios that we have in front of us. When we think about You Bet and where we are, we know that our topography is extremely vulnerable to wildfires. We know that there haven't been significant fires in the vast majority of the You Bet and neighboring communities for at least 75, if not 100 years. So we're facing a fire deficit, which means that any fire starts that occur here will move super fast because we've got lots and lots of underbrush. We know that one of the things we're faced with, of course, is our challenges. But when we talk about what we're going to talk about here today, it's super important that you guys have a map in your head or you have it on Google Maps, because we'll be talking around some specific areas. And depending on your personal familiarity with these areas, you might need to refer to a map, right? And so part of what we're talking about is personal responsibility and understanding the options, but also being able to know where those go. So before we get started, let's just talk a little bit about, it's a roundtable, talk a little bit about what your plan is right now, what your thoughts are around evacuation and shelter in place and your concerns. And because this session we're doing was really instigated in a good way by our neighbor Juan, I would like Juan to sort of start with, what prompted your desire to have more of a community-wide conversation around shelter in place.
Hi, Casey. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. My wife and I were involved in the 49 fire back in '89, I believe, a while back. And it was a tremendous experience. Evacuation was impossible. And I felt that none of us were prepared to stay behind. So we were in a quandary there, what to do when we had zero preparation for sheltering in place. So as we look at moving up here more recently, past in like 2006 or so, we started looking at first masticating all over the place and then building with the idea that there was going to be a fire coming through here, possibly within our lifetime. So we got rid of a lot of the underbrush and ladder fields and also constructed out of metal. So it will be a lot more resistant to fire. And then looking at You Bet and how we get a couple of hundred cars on the road and there's one accident that will block it. We really believe that for us, either staying at our place and fighting the fire is the best option, meaning sheltering in place. But it's been years of preparation and having water sources. And if sheltering in place, meaning our house, doesn't work, then we look at other options we have because you never know what's going to happen, and you need to be prepared for different options, including places where we can possibly get to in our car if we feel the fire is going to overwhelm us. But our intention here has always been that evacuation will be very difficult, if not impossible, for many of us, and therefore get ready for sheltering in place and be as safe as possible. There are no guarantees, like you said, but we feel that building out of metal, our home, having a water source around the house that you can have a pretty good chance of not only yourself surviving, but keeping your property from burning down. Also, this whole notion of looking at ignition sources, because a fire is the embers that do a lot of destruction and start fires all over the place. So making sure that there are no ignition sources near the house that can possibly contribute to a very bad experience. So anyway, we've been working at this for a while now.
Yeah, you have one, and thank you. And as each of you guys, share your thoughts and your story, say your name and where on You Bet you live, what road you live on. We've got folks on here, that may or may not know everybody. So, Juan, where do you actually live?
We live at the end of Old Emigrant Trail.
And you've lived here how long?
Full time, I don't know, maybe 2006, I believe. Maureen, how long have we been here?
But you bought the property in the 80s, right?
Yeah, 1990 approximately.
Yeah, so you've had access up here for a while. Awesome. Okay, well that was a great sort of stage setter for what we're going to talk about going forward. Eric, can I switch to you if you don't mind? Just share sort of what your plan is, what your thoughts and your concerns.
Yeah, well, I'm Eric. I'm up on Chalk Bluff Road, a couple miles past Red Dog, and uh, I'm of the mindset that you just leave immediately. As soon as anything, you just get out. There's no, and from here, I mean, I can get out up Chalk Bluff Road to Highway 20. Or I could go down and go to Red Dog and cross at Red Dog across the Greenhorn, or go down to You Bet with all of you if that would be my least desirable way to go. I mean, if a lot of people are evacuating, obviously I'd rather go the place where there's less people. But just depending what's open, But we've done a lot of defensible space here and all of that, but I'm totally not prepared to stay here during a fire. Not at all.
So I guess the question is this, we're going to chat a pretty deep dive on the various options. So, what we're saying here is what happens if we can't evacuate for whatever reason. So,
Yeah.
so that's what we'll be sharing, but I like to go early if you can.
Yeah, I mean, my best bet to stay is to go up to the Tonys just next door to me. And I mean, they have much better setup for that.
So more clearance.
More clearance, and they have a lot of water and a pond, and and they have like a 2-inch buried water line with fire hose things around their entire property.
Yep.
So and enough water to feed it because of the pond.
Yep.
So and I can get up there easily. I could walk, and I could also just drive up there without having to go on the road or on the road, depending what's available.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm totally not prepared to stay here.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks. Terry on Joker's Wild, let's go to you.
I have a question first for Eric. Is Chalk Bluff open and unfenced all the way to 20?
Oh, it's definitely not fenced. There's
Good.
absolutely, but you'd need, and I meant to do this before, but I forgot this meeting was today and I meant to drive the road before this meeting, but I totally forgot this meeting was today until just a couple hours ago. Um, uh, I haven't been up it in over a year, but I usually go up every year. You definitely need a high clearance vehicle and preferably a four-wheel drive. If you
It's
have
in,
like a Toyota Corolla, I would not go that way at all.
Yeah.
yeah, it's in pretty good shape right now, Eric. I was up there
Is
just
it?
last week.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Good.
But
Good.
it's still, but to your point, it's also very narrow at sides. And, as we think through this, a lot of this, and I understand this could be an emotional discussion, but, we have to sort of face our realities. And one of the realities is it could be in the midst of a wildfire. And, even in the daytime, it's dark and black smoke. And there is sections of Chalk Bluff that have very steep sides on a narrow one-lane road with no barricades. And you might not see it. Or if you have a second car, there's a lot of risk, not just the clearance, but in the midst of a wildfire, it'd be a pretty scary road to drive.
And I mean, from my place, it's roughly like 10 more miles.
Yeah, it's
So
13.
it's not like a quick out.
No, it's 13 miles from
Red Dog.
Red Dog up to
Yeah.
20.
Yeah.
And, in the when we talk about fire scenarios, it obviously can start anywhere and go any direction. But yeah, going out 20 based on sort of the fire science is probably our least option, because most of the fires are going to be coming down on us from the northeast wind. Those are the scariest scenarios. So we have to think about that
Interesting.
too. All right, Terry, tell us what's your plan and what your concerns are.
Yeah, well, I'm here to learn. I mean, if I go out my driveway and turn left on Joker's Wild, uh, Red Conisaro already has a couple fences across it, so I can't get out that way. Um, my current idea is I don't think that I can stay in place, although I have a generator and that's hooked up to the well. But, that's, I don't have a system set up, and
Got it.
I can't run around the house seeing where the sparks are landing. So, my plan is to either go up Red Dog and try to get into the creek, or if necessary, go, along You Bet Road, which is scary.
It is. Okay. Well, we'll
My
talk
real
more.
plan, I mean, when that fire hit Colfax a couple years ago,
Yep, the river fire.
I heard of it right from the beginning. I jumped in my car and I drove to San Francisco. So
Good man.
that's my plan, is get out of Dodge before anything happens.
Okay, so I'm going to shift to Rich.
Okay. Yeah, I think our plan, like others, is at the first sign of trouble, get out of Dodge. The concern is that You Bet it will be unpassable. Talked about headed down to the reservoir, Rollins Lake. But we don't have an actual plan. I think sheltering in place would be a last resort. We've done a lot of land clearing. We also have a generator, but we don't.
You're a little hard to hear, Rich. Can you speak up?
Sure, we do have a generator, but we don't have water storage, and so we don't actually have a plan for sheltering in place. That's kind of one of the things we're working on.
Okay, well, this will help you.
Yeah.
Let's shift now to Devin and Dave.
Hi, so yeah, we're up on Sontag Hill. We've been here 3 years. We don't have a plan in place, so that's why we're here. We have a couple of horses, which if we can't get out on You Bet, then it's gonna be pretty tough for us to pull a trailer. We have a large 4-wheel drive, but we also have a try to pull a horse trailer. I mean, worst case scenario, we let them loose, you know, if it's a last resort situation, but, so sheltering in place is not something that we would want to do. We would want to get out quick and early if possible, but it is you know, something that we have to consider. So that's why we're here.
That's awesome. That's smart. Thank you. Thank you, Dave and Deb. Terry, would you like to share kind of your thoughts? And you're muted, Terry.
Terry Chamberlain, you mean?
Terry, if you're there, you can unmute yourself. There you go. Go ahead, Terry.
Are you talking to Terry Young or Terry?
Terry Chamberlain.
What I thought.
We already heard from Terry Young.
Yep.
Terry, you're unmuted, so you can go ahead.
He just posted a text that said he can't get his phone linked as a microphone.
Okay, Terry, we'll come back to you. I'd like to move to Chris Knox. And for those of you just joining us, we're doing a roundtable discussion around current ideas on plans with our neighbors, and then we'll move into the content. Go ahead, Chris.
I don't know that we have a plan other than we have upgraded our water system so that I have sprinklers, copper tubing sprinklers on the roof, on the house and the garage that are run off of a 2,600 gallon tank. Besides the 2,500 gallon tank that is available for the fire people. We'd like to stay in place. Going out Red Dog to Chalk Bluff doesn't sound good. Like you say, fire may be coming from that direction. Why run into it? We're quiet. We're 4 miles up You Bet from 174. I don't know that we could make the 4 miles down with everyone converging on that. So shelter in a place, I think, is our best bet at this point. We've cleared around the house. I keep it clear 150 feet around the house and working on pine needles and pine cones and oak leaves. But so we're doing the best we can with what we've got.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Mhm.
We have a couple folks that joined us. Rose, if you would like to share your thoughts around what your current plans are for shelter in place or evacuation. And you're muted, so you can unmute yourself. And then Larry, you'll be next.
I do not have any plans. I'm hoping to learn.
Okay, welcome and thank you for joining us. Larry on Capitol, you're up. You're muted, Larry, if you want to chime in.
And Terry's
now?
There you go.
Yeah, I'm trying to learn too what might be my best options to do. I'm only a mile off of 174, but you can still get caught from the fire coming that way. So I was trying to hope to learn something here myself.
Okay. I'm going to move us in to some of the things that I've prepared to talk about. Thank you guys for sharing. And as I said, you know, we are recording. Part of this is I'll do some excerpts that make sense. And I'm going to try to set up a You Bet Firewise YouTube channel so that neighbors who couldn't make it tonight can benefit from the discussion and some of the key learnings. I just wanted to kind of call out this notion of our wildfire season preparedness we've been working toward over the last 6 months. And where this fits in is really around evacuation drills. And we can call it, you know, anything else, but it's understanding what our options are and at least formulating some preliminary plans. But when it comes to evacuation, you know, we need plan A, plan B, plan C. You've heard me say before, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And for us, the worst case scenario is that we are trapped on You Bet, that 174 is not accessible. And, you know, there could be a variety of scenarios where we literally don't have a way out, like Juan said at the beginning. So what I found out during the river fire, and thank you, Terry Young, for going early, we probably had about 50% of the community did evacuate successfully, and we were only under a mandatory or a evacuation warning. We never got to a mandatory evac. But that question, the should I stay or should I go question, it sits heavy on all of us. Mike and I struggle with it, and you know we're working toward preparing for all options, but we are facing incredible amounts of challenges. I mentioned earlier our topography, but we also know we end up Peninsula Campground. We did some modeling years ago. If all of us tried to evac at one time, you're backed up 2.5 to 3 miles on You Bet. It's one of the key reasons that we have the GMRS radio program in place and road monitors. Those of you who live along the road know that we're going to call on you to tell us, are cars moving? Are they stuck? What have you? One of the worst places to be is trapped in your vehicle in a fire. So I recommend that if we're in the midst of a wildfire, don't jump in your car and go until you know that you have a place to go. So I'm not going to belabor all of these sorts of challenges that we face, but we have them. That picture was off my back deck. I thought the fire was on my property. A trailer exploded on the road next to mine. And so, yeah, these things can happen right on top of you. And when that happens, there isn't a lot of time to formulate a plan. So that's why we're really kind of focusing here today on our options. I just wanted to pull this map out. Some of you guys have been here a lot longer than I have. Right before I moved in was the Lowell fire. And that was the largest fire in the You Bet community in the last probably 10 years. And, as I've been doing this Firewise stuff over the last 7 years, I've talked to an awful lot of the first responders, and they all felt that could have been the quote, the one, rival the 49er fire, sweeping down through Steep Hollow Canyon, driven by northeast winds, so forth and so on. So, that was the kind of thing that we're talking about. These big fires, that are coming, and we have warning, they're coming from further away. We can, go with plan A, evacuate early. But when they're right on top of us, we may not have that kind of a leisure. So I mentioned at the beginning that I had done some research around how survivable are different decisions. And I'm going to email you guys what I'm sharing with you. So you don't need to take copious notes. And I also have put together some checklists for each scenario that we're going to be talking about. But to level set this conversation going forward, I just wanted to make sure that we get on the same page as it relates to the terminology, and then some requirements for each. So, like I said, don't worry about taking notes. On the left-hand side of this, basically we have, I think it was 7 options. You can evacuate early. You can wait and evacuate when mandatory is provided. You can stay and defend your home, like Juan talked about. You can shelter in place, just huddle down in your house without necessarily trying to defend it. We mentioned zones of last resort. There's a whole bunch of terminology if you guys follow wildfires, things like temporary refuge areas or safety zones. Safety zones are typically what firefighters identify when they're in a wildfire. It meets very specific requirements. It's usually like a 3 square mile opening and clearance and things of that nature. TRAs, or temporary refuge areas, are identified during a wildfire by first responders. Oftentimes it's like a hospital parking lot or a mall, or places that have a lot of asphalt, depending on the path of the fire. Zone of last resort, what we're looking at is areas that we can pre-identify that are not going to offer great chances of survivability, but they're better than being overrun completely. And last but not least, we have trapped in the vehicle and the water refuge. So that sequence, actually, if you look at it and say, what does the data say? Data from CAL FIRE, FEMA, US Fire Administration, Australia, stand and defend programs, etc. This is how it plays out. So from left to right, best to worst. Obviously, evacuation, we said as our disclaimer, is the only sort of guarantee of survival. But the likelihood of surviving decreases the further along this continuum you go. So evacuate, mandatory shelter in place offers some survivability, zone of last resort, so forth and so on. And we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive on each of these. The first thing I wanted to throw in there is stay and defend fits in this continuum, but because it is not a game day call that requires tons of preparation, like Juan was saying, it is on the continuum, but it's not something that you can just randomly decide to do one day. You have to be planning for it months, if not years in advance. We'll talk more about that too. So taking a deeper dive at each of those 7 quote options or scenarios, this gives you a really good indicator of survivability. And when you start getting into 3 through 7, when it says high to moderate or low to moderate or low, the fire scientists go to all these fires and they do all sorts of analysis in terms of where did the deaths occur? How did the deaths occur? And that's what we're talking about, is how do we survive? So your chances of survivability, yes, can you survive in a zone of last resort? Yes, and there's also a higher risk than, honestly, if you were to shelter in place. So let's keep going, and or let's stop. I've just already provided a ton of information and overview. Just reactions, comments, anything that you guys want to just kind of throw out there. Rich has got that look on his face. I'm glad I could see your face. It's a lot. It's a lot to think about.
Take it off my camera. Yeah, it's a little terrifying when you look at it.
It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to digest. But when I went kind of back to this, just this alone, I went, oh my God, okay. At least now I feel like I can prioritize my options a little bit better. And then we're going to go forward and do a deeper dive on the requirements for some of these. And, you know, like I said, I now have, I'm not quite finished. I'm going to do a document that I'll email out to everyone. I will be having a checklist, not just the standard, what you get in your ready, set, go guides. Here's your go bag checklist, right? A checklist for each one of these scenarios as a standalone. So each of us can sit there and go, okay, I'm prepared for this piece or not. So if it's something you're thinking about, you'll have a checklist of how to prepare for each of these. Shall I move forward? This is kind of a...
Hey, Casey.
Yeah.
Hey, Casey. This is Maureen, end of Old Immigrant Trail.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I know Juan, and he asked me to talk too, but I couldn't figure out how to unmute myself at the moment. So here I am.
Welcome. Well, share with us whatever it is you'd like to share.
Right. I wanted to share that if there is a wildfire, I am staying here. That is my option. And the 49er fire, which was in 88, because had the very few months old baby in arms, and we were stuck in traffic, not moving anywhere on Pleasant Valley Road while there were embers flying, people trying to evacuate large animals, horses. We saw some horses that had addresses spray painted on them. People on the side of the road injured, trying to get around cars. It was a mess. It was a mess. Nobody knew where to go, no cell phones. And anyway, that kind of experience seared into me. You're just going to stay here. And more so now that we're at the top of You Bet. And one accident on that road is just going to stop the whole evacuation route. So yep. We decided to let's figure out what we need to do, and we're going to stay here. And when I started looking for shelter in place information, I ran into dead ends in so far as American sources, and that may be because of our lawyer happy society here, and got good information from Australia. And the shelter in place really depends insofar as your success on how well have you prepared? Are you prepared to stay and actively defend for 9 hours, 12 hours? Do you have food? Do you have water? Do you have a place that you're not going to burn up in? You need to have that dedication. You need to have that physical mobility. So those are things, because in all the shelter in place information, sometimes people panic and decide to get the hell out of Dodge, but it's too late. And that's where the fatalities occur. So once you make up your mind, you got to commit and just stay with it. So that's my piece.
No, and that's an awesome overview, Maureen, and thank you. And we are going to do a deep dive on shelter in place and stay and defend here. But yeah, I mean, that clarity of voice is well regarded. Let me just quickly figure out where I am here. Oh, freaking computer. There we go. Yeah, so just building on what I was sharing, and basically what Maureen was talking about. One of the things I wanted to share was the fact that, you know, if you want to evacuate, you can make that decision right away. You can be prepared to go on a red flag day. Some people literally move down to Sacramento and get a hotel. And they do that because on red flag days, any wildfire start is going to move extraordinarily fast. And we've seen the escalation in speed over the last few years. It's mind-boggling. Many people, as we did 50% on the river fire, evacuate during a warning and certainly during a mandatory. What if you're prepared to evacuate and you haven't done the work for shelter in place or stay and defend, and you get trapped, you're likely going to be looking either to stay in your home or possibly a zone of last resort. The challenge with that is you guys really need to understand at that point, where's the map in your head? Once you know where the fire is, there's two questions, or when there's a fire, there's two questions that need to be answered instantly. One is, where's the location of the fire? The second is, which way is the wind blowing and how quickly? Those factors tell you where you could potentially go. So it's not like you can pre-identify exactly a zone of last resort. You need to understand what your options are and have situational awareness for that fire, and then decide which direction to go and where to head based on that. The question then becomes, is that zone of last resort accessible? And is that road open? So there's a bunch of wildcard factors in making those decisions in a high stress situation. For preparation, as Maureen was just saying, lots of shelter in place, defensible space clearing. Structure viability relates specifically to home hardening, and nobody has really mentioned that yet. So we'll get into a deep dive in that in a minute. And then also you have to understand what your shutdown procedures are. So Chris, when you were talking about, hey, we're going to stay here, but there's a hit list of items that you need to do if you're planning on staying in order to, quote, ember proof and increase, again, the likelihood that your home won't burn. Stay and defend obviously requires the most preparation. It's everything for shelter in place, plus it's making sure you have the right equipment, not just the water sources, but all of the equipment. You need to be prepared to do an ember patrol. 80% of homes burn through embers, not the fire front itself and not through the radiant heat. But there's 3 ways that homes burn, and those are 3 of them. 80% are through embers. So in essence, you harden your home so that embers don't have a place to go, and then you patrol the surroundings externally and internally with a mop and a bucket if need be to put out those embers. But that requires physical ability, and it requires mental fortitude. So the reality that I've been told, not having been in a wildfire of that nature that creates its own, you know, winds and weather systems, is it sounds like a freight train is running at you. So you've got to be able to visualize and be able to withstand that physically and mentally. And not all of us are. I don't know that I am, frankly. You know, I might just cower under the bed and cry. But this is just want to kind of do a wake-up call, because I've heard a lot of people in You Bet say, oh, I'm going to shelter in place. And then when I ask them if they've done the work, they're like, no. I go, well, then you can't. So we're going to take a deep dive on that. But before I go any further, any other thoughts, or does this impact your plan or your ideas for your plan at this point? And if so, just unmute and chime in. And
yeah,
if
this
not,
is Terry, Old Immigrant. Can you hear me?
Hey, welcome, Terry. Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah, finally got my old equipment out of retirement, and then I can do this again. Yeah, a lot of people are of the mindset that if they're defending them, the fire themselves, that they're fighting the forest fire. You aren't going to win that battle. If you're defending it, you're trying to save your house, and that's it. You're not going to go out and put out the burning trees and bushes around you if there's flames coming in. So, that's hasn't really been made clear from what I've been hearing.
Stay and defend means defend your home. You're 100% right. All right, your backup plan when the road is gone. There's no way out. So let's talk a little bit more about shelter in place and what those considerations are for you to shelter in place. This chart, and again, you're going to get all of this. This chart is what you need to have planned for to effectively shelter in place. The first is, I mentioned the home hardening. If you haven't had a defensible space visit, myself, Mike, Brad, we've been doing them, throughout the community for the last 5-6 years. Basically what that means is that everything in your home has been hardened to not allow embers to penetrate. Defensible space, I think we're all pretty good with that. It's really limbing up, thinning out, and making clearance. Zone 0, which is from your structure to 5 feet out, is the home ignition zone. The law is now clean and clear. No plants up against your house or around it, nothing combustible. And then as far out as you can go. The maps indicate 30 feet, 100 feet to 300, but we're blessed in having a lot more land, so we have the capability of clearing even further. Ultimately, we should have all of our forests back to their original state and have good clearing. Water and power, essential. You've got to have a system for that. Emergency supplies. One of the things, and these are checklists that I'll be sending out as well, the go bags that are pretty much promoted are pretty basic. We definitely need to augment them if you're sheltering in place, with fire blankets, water, food, fire extinguishers ready, even if you're planning on staying in the house, because if embers do come inside, you have to have a way to put them out. And you may lack oxygen, so you need masks and or respirators. The communication system is key. If the cells, towers burn down, we have our radios, which is awesome. My go bag does include a hand crank and solar powered radio too, so that I can listen to, KVMR or other things. So I've got multiple communication options. Interior, if you're sheltering in place, you need to know where is your most fire resistant location. From my house, it faces southwest. If the fire is coming up the hill, it's the opposite side of the house, right? So you want to make sure that you know, based on where the fire is, where you want to be. You want to keep the lights on for visibility in case, there are first responders who may come. And then from a vehicle perspective, even if you're sheltering in place, if your house starts to catch fire, you may need to leave and go to a zone of last resort. So you want to make sure you've got your vehicle parked facing out. On a red flag day, that's the best practice. Don't keep your car in the garage, have it outside, ready to go. Make sure you always have at least a half tank, if not a full tank of gas. And it should already be loaded. Mental readiness. Visualize, practice, know where you're going to go, you and your family members. So these are some of the key things in terms of preparing to shelter in place that we have to take care of. When you talk about staying defed, and I'm going to segue right into this, it's not a game day call. Maureen was spot on when she said, this has been years of preparation for one. You cannot stay and defend if you don't know what you're doing. It's literally, you're out and about with all this, embers and smoke swirling around, and you have to be super ready. So to what Terry was talking about, the stay and defend is not fighting the wildfire, but it's about protecting the property and using the tools and skills that you have developed to actually proactively try to put out embers, maybe create a fire line, do certain things. Whereas shelter in place is a lot more of a passive kind of an activity. What I will say, I also read a book, Maureen, from Australia, was given to me early in my Firewise career of 7 years. And it was variable. So they've had a lot of successes with Stay and Defend program, which was actually a governmental program, but they had some really extraordinary failures too. So when we talk about why those failures occur, it's really important to understand. And I'm going to go ahead and mute you guys because I'm hearing a clicking. And I'm easily distracted, in case you didn't know. Look, a squirrel. So let's talk about stay and defend and what makes a compare and contrast. And again, this is data that came through fire science and globally. So this is not me saying it. I synthesized it down to best practices. Some of this is repetitive, but it bears repeating. The structure hardening and clearing the zones, it reduces the opportunity for fires and embers to ignite. The more you have cleared, and Chris mentioned the pine needles, it's the little things, right? It's the little things that every ember will catch. It doesn't matter how small it is. It could be a Kleenex. It could be a broom leaning up against a shed. Those are the types of things that embers they eat them up. So you want to make sure, even if you have your zones clear, you're going into a red flag day, you want to do a sweep around it and make sure that you've got everything removed from anywhere near your structures. Staging water and tools early. We had a fire in the community a few years back. It was Mike Bandy. He's been up here for like 50 years, and it was structure fire. And I had the chance to go debrief with him on it and what happened. And he said, I thought I was ready. I wasn't. For him, it was as simple as he had renters, Airbnbers come in. So he had moved a hose so they could have access to it. And so where he thought he had hoses at every faucet, he did not. And so he was unable to save structure and about $500,000 worth of his equipment because in his mind, he was ready. But it wasn't a wildfire, but even for a structure fire, he thought he had water staged and tools available, and they weren't where they were supposed to be. So in this season, we've got to check and recheck. I just had Mike go to Sam's Club. I said, I want a hose on every faucet. I don't care how silly that sounds. And then the other best practice is you keep hoses inside as well as backup in case the ones that are outside melt. So you have a hose in the garage. So after the fire front passes, you can bring out a fresh hose if need be. Staying alert and ready, canned coffee is great. Because this thing could be coming toward you, and it might be hours. I think Maureen mentioned 9 hours. It could be a long time. The patrolling of embers is literally going outside, and there's a whole series of best practices on how to do that. But you need to set up a system and figure out who's going to do what, and be prepared to be outside, and obviously wearing your protective clothing and have all your gear on, but doing battle with those embers. And then again, make informed early decisions. If you've committed to it, but find out that you're being overrun or overwhelmed, you need to know what you're going to do in that moment. So I mentioned that there's been a lot of studies around in the failures. These are the primary reasons basically that people died while trying to stay and defend their homes. And the top one and the bottom one are 100% the most important. They did not finish the defensible space prep, and they did not harden their home. The last one I'm going to hit now, defending indefensible homes. What my worst fear is for us in You Bet is that people are going to choose to stay, but their structure isn't survivable. I've done almost 100 home visits in the You Bet community over the last 7 years. And I will tell you, there are places that I have visited where if embers come to that structure, there's no saving it. It's an older home. It might be, a log cabin, whatever the materials are, it's highly flammable, and there's no way to make it hardened. So the reality is people have to understand what their structure is and also what it isn't. So if it's not something that can house them safely, they should never be entertaining this notion of shelter in place. Delayed decision-making, back to that, Maureen mentioned it, but you can't prepare to defend on the day of. This is not a game day call. We've already covered the physical and mental. People think that, hey, I can do this, but a lot of us are getting older, and we've got to be realistic about what we are in fact capable of. And then I think the one thing that's super hard for any of us to sort of anticipate is, what is that what's going to happen, right? How much smoke, how much wind. As you guys all know, I've done multiple prescribed fires on my property. And one of the things that I did on the first one was to go through the smoke. I walked through it because I wanted to see how I was impacted by it. And what I learned is that I can't keep my eyes open for more than 3 seconds walking through that kind of smoke. So my go kit, the first thing I have, one of the first things I grab is includes some goggles. I literally physically cannot keep my eyes open. And so without having been through that kind of smoke, just on a prescribed fire, you know, intentionally, I wouldn't have known that. So understanding what, you know, each of us is and is not capable of is something really important to understand. So the non-negotiable preparations, just to summarize all that, number one, you've got to harden your structure. Number two, defensible space. And number three, you've got to be prepared for all options to go, to stay, and defend if you're going to shelter in place and if you're thinking you're going to stay and defend. And that preparation is what we just talked about. So with that, I think most everyone's pretty familiar with both concepts, home hardening and defensible space. But I felt I had to include a little bit more because even in our opening comments, no one mentioned, everyone talks about defensible space. No one talks about home hardening. And again, 80% of the homes are destroyed by embers. And as Terry said, what we're talking about is defending our home. So I'm not going to go through this in detail, but when we do our home visits, we share where the vulnerable spots are and what each person needs to do in order to protect their home and how to make it home hardened. So that's something I encourage everyone to reach out. If you have not had a home visit, we can do that. And here's our defensible space. Our new nonprofit in the county just launched in June this idea of Zone Zero cheat sheet, which is that 0 to 5 foot structure. You know, it's late in the season now, but it's not too late to still do some of the minimum activities. And that's the checklist that's here. So it's not only, you know, what you can do now, but it's also when a red flag day is approaching. That bottom one, you want to move your trash cans, tires, all sorts of things out of the immediate vicinity of your structure, and make sure that, you know, you push that to 30 feet out or more. And these are the standard, you know, zones that we operate under when we talk about defensible space and creation of that. All right, so I'm going to open it up again. I know it's a lot of information. Any thoughts or feedback in terms of now that you kind of seen the options, survivability from least to highest, and then sort of the requirements and preparation required for shelter in place? What are your thoughts? Go ahead, Rich. You're muted.
Okay, not to derail and dig into home hardening so far, but where do like lawns rate if they're irrigated lawns?
Irrigated lawns, is that what you said?
Yes, like your front lawn.
Yeah, those are great. I mean, everything burns, but here's the rule of thumb that you need to think about is, first of all, zone 0 means no lawn up to your structure, but from 0 to 5 feet is clean and clear. And then you have a lawn, that's great, especially if it's, you know, well irrigated and maintained. Everything will burn. The rule of thumb is that any plant will burn 3 times its height. So if your lawn is only 1 inch, you're only going to have a 4-inch flame. So it's not a significant concern. And in fact, lawns can slow down the pace of the fire, acts kind of like a fuel break.
Thank you.
But those of you who are keeping your plants up against your windows, stand next to it if it's a foot tall, and now all of a sudden you got a 4-foot flame. I bet you that's hitting directly at your windows, and I bet you that could cause them to break, and then the fire can come into your house. So that's the reasoning behind the zone 0, the home ignition zone, and clean and clear from your structure out. Oops. Hello there. Hello, Hollywood. I don't even know how that happened, so I'm just clicking back. I'm just waving my mouse around the screen and it just decided to jump ahead or jump back. All right, so I'm going to touch briefly on alternate evacuation routes and zones of last resort. I mentioned earlier in sort of that preparation thing, the zones of last resort is a game day call. Mentioned knowledge, knowing your map, knowing where they are, and then being aware of where the fire is. Those are the only ways to survive. The reality is, you know, you cannot like call me or get on the radio and go, I don't know where to go. Everyone's like, well, where are you? What are your choices? What do you have planned? And what we will be saying on the radios is, hey, Peninsula Campground parking lot is accessible at this point in time. It will have a capacity issue. Currently, there are spaces available. So we will relay information that we have, but we may not know everything. So when we think about the alternate evac routes, we're in process. You know, Eric, you mentioned Red Dog and Chalk Bluff. I mean, we've been talking about that forever. What we're working on now is we're trying to get neighborhoods to encourage neighbors to create backyard egresses. The most important ones for you guys to know about right now are Sontag Road, not Sontag Hill, but Sontag Road does connect over to Greenpeace and then Greenhorn access through Lewis Road. There are pilings there. The neighbors who live there will be using tractors to move those so we can stream cars out of there. That will give us a second egress to 174 via Greenhorn access. Importantly, that also links us to the Greenhorn access campground. Same thing off Sontag Hill, and Deb and Dave are probably aware of this, but off Cahill. So Terry and Dan, neighborhood leaders, radio from the beginning. Their backyard, they have a neighborhood agreement with their backyard. Super steep. It's not a road, it's a hill. And down to the neighbors on Greenpeace, and you can get out that way. Those two, in my mind, are the most viable. It's also important that you recognize coming up 174, You Bet, the very first road for us is Lost Lake on the left. And the Greenhorn Firewise community has been turning that into their emergency evac route. So they're going to go Greenhorn, Lost Lake to You Bet, which further clogs our ability to get out 174. I think I mentioned this in one of our last meetings, but they actually, as a community, raised $30,000 and they're working on road improvements starting next week, July 7th. Hanson Brothers will be doing the road work to improve Lost Lake. For us to go Lost Lake to Greenhorn, maybe, I'm not saying it's not viable, but in most wildfire scenarios, I'd be like, why would we want to do that? Now we're trapped on Greenhorn. So that's a possibility in terms of routes out. And then there are some things that could potentially exist between the roads that back up to Little Greenhorn Creek. So Mulberry, Capitol, even Fawn Hill, Side Bet, all of those roads connect to Little Greenhorn Creek, which could go out to Greenhorn as well. But again, we don't really know. So that's the road situation. When it comes to zones of last resort, I've just compiled what we talk about all the time into a chart. Again, I'm trying to create some reference tools that we could each have at our fingertips. And, you know, you guys could then study it and go, okay, where is that? Let me figure it out. But top to bottom, Hanson Brothers Quarry, it's wide open, gravel. We are fortunate to have, you know, 2 of their staff members, including Ron Miner, who's one of our neighborhood leaders in Fifield area, as the general manager. Legally, that thing will be opened up during any wildfire. And let's say we're headed down You Bet and it's blocked, we can, you know, siphon off into the quarry. Again, that's a zone of last resort. You know, you're in your vehicle. You're going to have to know, you know, what you need to make sure you have on hand to survive that. I mentioned the Peninsula Campground at Rollins Lake. Rollins Lake shoreline. I've met people in You Bet who say, oh, I live right on the lake at the end of Ewan Court. I'm just going to jump in the water. Greenhorn Campground, similar to Peninsula, but much more open and much bigger. I did stop by there today. I was at a meeting and I'm like, huh. I ended up hanging out for 45 minutes with the operations manager, Tom, and just explained that, you know, we wanted to use it as a zone of last resort if we can access it. They're like, you guys are welcome anytime, you know, if that happens. that would be that Sontag Road. If the fire is blocking 174, we'd go left on, Greenhorn access to the campground instead. Really spacious. I mean, it's a beautiful site. The issue there would be, wind-driven fires, embers, so stay in your vehicle. A lot of people talk about the old mine diggings, right? So if you go up Red Dog, probably Eric, you're familiar with a lot of this. There's a lot of spaces up that area that are, wide open. There's no vegetation or low vegetation. Same, super difficult to access, but in terms of survivability, not horrible. Open meadows, there's a handful of them. They're not recommended because I don't know that anyone has been, burning off their flashy fuels every year. So that stuff's going to burn. And then in addition to this, there's a variety of properties, personal properties that have some pretty significant defensible space where there's probably survivability. So the old McBurney's property with the blue hole, big pond, you've got those, but I don't have those listed. So what I want us to work toward is, kind of figuring this out and hopefully starting to develop better organization around mapping and understanding what, options there are. But this is a good start. Anything jump out at you guys in terms of these specific locations? Any questions or things that I've missed at the top level?
What about Lawton's Meadow?
So yeah, Lawton's Meadow, thank you. That's, top of You Bet at Red Dog. We started down that path when I first started Firewise, getting CAL FIRE and Peardale involved and setting it up to be a zone of last resort. That fell off the radar because CAL FIRE, basically didn't want the liability. But yeah, it potentially could be. I don't know that the work has been done to make it safe. It was going to require a burn off every year. When we did our firefighter training in the spring, we did do a 2-acre burn of Scotch broom off the side of it. So that helps. But, it's a great idea to kind of refresh that. If Gary, would allow, we could get our tractors out there and do a fire line all around that meadow. And then I would say it probably has a chance. It's just not big enough because there's so many super tall pine trees around it. So it doesn't meet the requirements for like a safety zone. But as a zone of last resort, not a bad option. Other locations come to top of mind based on where you live?
This isn't a location, but I was wondering if we have access to one of those maps that we can make big enough that we can see everything.
Hi, Laura. Are you
Hi.
talking about the You Bet map?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. I've got massive map that you can dial into every parcel if your computer's got the power for it. And I've got, other maps that I can send out. So thank you. I'll include that in the package.
Yeah, that I was thinking of making one kind of like what you brought to our meeting, because we've been here 25 years, but I don't know where all these roads and stuff are. So.
Well, guess what? You guys are new on the radio program as of 2 nights ago. And the radio, when we check in, is a great opportunity to start to follow along, have a printed map. By the way, the recommendation for go bags is to have a hard copy map with you because most of us use our Google Maps. And so if the cell towers go down, we have our radios, but we don't have our maps.
Right.
And I was like, oh, great point. Because I rely totally on my Google map, right? But if it's not working, then, I'm fortunate. I've been doing this a while. I know pretty much where everything is, but most people here don't. They're like you, Laura. They don't get out for, you go 174 to Capitol, 174 to Capitol.
Yeah.
As you should.
As I should.
Well, we can continue building this out. I will share with you guys that I've really struggled with this idea of privacy and the backyard handshake agreements. When we were first, doing Firewise and talking about that, I said, that's up to you guys, in your neighborhoods. we've got over 20 neighborhoods or areas in You Bet. I'm like, that's up to you guys to do. I don't need to know, but I've kind of shifted. And now with the wildfire situation, I feel like we probably do need to know where those are. So I think we're going to kind of start pushing on trying to get that as more of a shared information versus just, some people know and some people don't. I mean, you guys agree with that? Oops, I did it again. Hello.
Yes,
Absolutely.
agree.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Then I'll stop struggling with it. One of the checklists that I'll be sending out to you is just titled "Trapped in Your Vehicle." I've always heard this is the worst place to be, and the long and short of it, a lot of meetings. Some of you guys attended our town hall and so forth. We go over the basics of it, but what I'm going to suggest is that everyone start to develop multiple go bags. One is a vehicle go bag, and that vehicle go bag will not just suffice for if you're trapped, but also if you're on the road. A lot of people carry not only a shovel, right? And if you have to put out roadside fires, same thing with a fire extinguisher, but also chainsaws. So one of the biggest risks on the road is that a tree goes down in front of you, and that's why you're trapped. So, wouldn't you rather be able to jump out, get the limbs down, and figure out a way to clear? So not saying that's for everyone. Fortunately, here in You Bet, we have an awful lot of folks who, are kind of into trees and vegetation mitigation, and a lot of people have that, but it's not a bad idea. Always carry in your vehicle. I don't care when it is during fire season, not just during, this kind of a wildfire event, but the wool blanket is critical. That wool blanket acts like a fire blanket. And when you get down on the floor in your car, you've got to put that over you. I've got one down and then I've got one on top, right? And so that will help protect you from any of the radiant heat. All the checklist stuff will be on that list, but definitely take it seriously and create it as a vehicle go bag, and it stays in the car. And if you change cars for whatever reason, take it with you, because you never know when a fire is going to occur. So this was something I shared at the You Bet Town Hall over at the library in the spring, and got a lot of silence. What if you can't evacuate? Is your vehicle prepped and preloaded? Is your driveway cleared? Have you done the work to shelter in place? Has your home passed the ember resistant test? Do you have turnarounds for fire trucks? Have you really created your go bags accessibly? And do you know what to do if you're trapped in your car? Turn on your lights, close your vents, things like that. So these are the questions that, you guys participating in this session, but also the checklist will help you figure out. And then it's up to each one of us to do the work to get prepared.
This is a lot of hard work.
It is a lot of hard work. And Terry, that's why you're going to be the one who's out of here early and often.
You bet.
And to that point, there are people in our community who literally pack up and go on red flag days. And so they don't have to worry about doing all this preparation. They're just going to go. And
Right.
and I've suggested to people, if you have horses, Deb and Dave, if you have, or other large animals, or a lot of them that you need to get out, if you, have young kids and families and pets, and so you've got like all these pieces of vulnerable people, if you need extra time, whether that's being disabled or elderly, those are reasons to not stick around. I mean, people say, go to Sacramento, go to the museum, have a great weekend, come back when the red flag day, dissipates. But that's not a bad option. But if we're talking about shelter in place, and you are talking about potentially staying, you've got to do all your go bags. You need to know, Laura, you and Larry need to get out and drive the You Bet roads. Take a map, take the zones of last resort, mark them, put a highlighter on them, circle them. For me, it's visualize what it will be like, and drill that. We're recommending, if you do a practice drill, tell yourself the wildfire's on you. You've got to leave in 5 minutes. Do you have your go bags ready? Can you get out of the house? You know, if that code red comes in and the fire's right on top of us, we had a CAL FIRE call out a few weeks ago, and I'm in my chair and I hear fire, smoke alert, You Bet, and Old Emigrant Trail. And I'm like, you have no idea how fast I got out of my chair. I was thinking it was right on top of me. And I'm spinning in circles. My first thing was call Mike, get the brush truck going. But you know what I mean? Like, you have to envision and figure out what your actions are going to be, because when it hits you, there's no time to figure it out. So my final thing is prep like you mean it. You know, back to what Maureen said, preparation, preparation, preparation. And that's your home, property, driveway, car, road. All of it needs to be prepared.
I wanted to say that when I escaped with the fire coming out of Colfax, what is it, the river fire?
Yep.
I really feared when I left. I packed up as very quickly, got in the car, and I feared that You Bet would be backed up. But fortunately, at that early time, I didn't see another car. And I got to
Yeah.
174 and I turned right instead of going toward Colfax.
Well, it's closed, right?
I'm smart. And then headed out toward, Grass Valley, and then down 49, and 49 was backed up. So I went back and got on 20. But there were challenges all over the place.
Yeah.
Life still goes on when the fire goes on. So in that example, 49 was backed up for miles, but
Yeah.
that's because of a big accident, not because of the fire. Anyway, a lot of it, and it happens really quickly. I was in Berkeley with the last Berkeley Hills fire in, I think, 89. And I had friends in the hills who heard the sirens and opened their doors, and the fire was there.
Oh, wow.
Just like you described with the notice you got the other day. It was right at their front door. And fortunately they made it out, but boy, it moves fast and unpredictably.
You're right. And then the river fire, I heard stories of just that happening. And a guy literally ran out his back door with his shorts and barefoot, and they had a stream through their property. He just ran in the water so his feet wouldn't burn. And then ended up going face down and ended up surviving. But so yeah, I've learned too much in the last 7 years, and the horror stories and the survivor stories. And I've been fortunate to participate in a lot of sessions where fire scientists present their findings and so forth. And for me, it's about trying to figure out practical ways, to stay safe and do the best we can. Right. I will share. No, I didn't share at the beginning. What Mike and I are doing is we are preparing to stay and defend. And the work that we're doing and the tools that we have, and the practices that we're putting into place allow us that. We have an emergency hole to hide in if we are overrun by a wildfire. I've been validated by retired foresters and firefighters that our property is very defensible. We're working on the final touches of cleanup, but I'm also prepared to, bolt if I need to, right? So vehicle go bags, dog go bags, for the pets, all that kind of stuff. But, I've said it before, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. And for us, the worst is the fires here on top of us. But yeah, we've got the fire tools, we've got the fire truck, the brush truck with the water, the mops. I will share with you something I learned. Literally get the old-fashioned rag mops if you're going to shelter in place, and have buckets of water so you fill all the trash cans outside with water, not just relying on the hose. And you can take a bucket and this mop, soak the mop, and reach up into the eaves and put out the embers. It doesn't have to be the most high-tech system. That was a best practice that I read about years ago, and I was like, instantly went out and bought mops. Like, that's a good one. So there's all these little tips and tricks that you can learn about that potentially could help. So, I think Juan had a great idea to bring some of us together and have an open discussion around it. And I echo both what Maureen and Juan said about preparation. These are things that the realities of where we live, we have to be prepared. I've got neighbors and they're just like, hope is not a strategy. You can't just hope you'll be fine and the fire won't hit you and then go, oh my gosh, I'm here. That doesn't work for me. I don't want to enact any of this, but if we have to, I feel prepared mentally. Physically, I'm not so sure. I've had a lot of breaks, but I think I'll be okay. I just won a pickleball tournament last week, so probably better off than I think I am. So other thoughts? Juan, you kind of helped us, instigate this. Share any final thoughts from you?
I really want to thank you for a good discussion, good presentation. This is great. As a final thing here, and I saw that your property is very likely you're going to lose PG&E power. So you do need to have an alternative, your own generator, your own gas, water pumps, because most fires, PG&E, it will be out completely. So if you're thinking about a fire suppression sprinkler system, water hoses, I strongly suggest that you have an optional power source, and then make sure that your sprinkler system or whatever it is you have is going to work.
Yeah, and that's great one, and thanks for that. I did read somewhere recently that PG&E is actually, with the forecast for the fire season, they're actually planning on doing more PSPSs, public safety power shutoffs, this coming season than they have in the last 2 seasons. So I think you're right. I think those of us who do have, PG&E do need to be prepared for that.
Yeah. The final comment I want to talk about is the wind, how critical the wind direction, wind speed, and what have you is, and understanding the impact of the wind on fires. I'm thinking right now of, for example, Paradise, and how it was a very windy day, and that made things so much worse. Or we talked about the river fire. I remember, that fire, and how most of us were really concerned it was coming this way. And I go, I'm going to get everything ready to fight this fire, because I could see it coming to our property. And then the wind changed direction slightly. And I understood that perfectly well, that, okay, now we're okay, because embers and the fire is not going to be coming towards my house. And so I could relax a little bit. So anyways, understanding wind conditions, weather conditions, to me, is a very important element of knowing, fire behavior, because of the way wind influences what's going to happen with the fire.
Yeah, thank you for that. And, same thing, the river fire, you came over here to our house and you're like, it's coming right at you. I mean, we were literally bullseye target. We could see it off our back deck.
Yes.
And it was terrifying, and we didn't have the radios then. And so I was fielding texts and calls, and people are like, my cat. And I'm like, guys, I'm packing to evacuate. I can't go get your cat right now. It's here. But to your point about the wind, during the river fire, I called a forester friend of mine, not from You Bet. And I said, I need a favor. I need you to calculate, if nothing changes based on the current wind and fire direction, how long do I have? He called me back in 10 minutes. He says, you have 3 hours and 15 minutes. And you're right, the wind shifted as it does in the evenings, and we were fine. Mike and I stayed, but we slept in shifts because we could see the fire, and, laid down in the evening. We had eyes on, but we still did shifts in case it changed in the middle of the night, right? So, yeah, there's so much that goes into this.
Right. There
Casey,
is.
I wanted to jump in here because we're on the wind and reporting wind. Sometimes people get it backwards. When you talk about where the wind is coming from, that's where you want to say, where's the wind coming from? Like you have
Right.
a south wind, that means it's blowing from the south to the north. If you have a west wind, it's blowing from the west. And sometimes people get it turned around, and that makes it more difficult to calculate in your head. Okay, where's the wind coming from? Because where the wind's coming from, that's where the fire's coming from.
Thanks, Maureen. And yeah, I appreciate that. And since you taught me how to do burn piles, I know you know these things. But so let's take that a step further. And the winds that put us most at risk are the northeast winds, which means the wind is coming from the hot, dry northeast, and they're called Diablo winds here in Northern California. In Southern California, they're the Santa Ana winds, northeast winds. So that's what the firefighters and everybody, once those northeast winds are forecasted, that is, high alert time during fire season. And when they call a red flag day, which is high winds, super dry, super hot, the reason that that's a red flag day is basically any spark will ignite and move fast. So if it's fast and it's a northeast wind, and we get the call out that there's an ignition up Chalk Bluff or Dutch Flat or I-80 with the trucker brakes, that wind is blowing our way. So every time we've had a fire in the last 4 to 6 weeks in those locations, I'm on the radios acting as if it's a drill. It's good practice for us to, leverage what we know about that when it's not right on top of us, so that when we do have a fire on top of us, we're all prepared for what to say and how to act. And I will also say about the winds, I think you guys all know that we launched the wildfire smoke detectors to the community over the last couple of weeks. A lot of you guys were on those calls. We do have 4 wind sensors that are You Bet specific as part of that program. So if you've opted in and signed up for those,
Hey, Casey, I don't hear anything.
You don't hear me? Hello? Testing 1, 2.
We hear you.
I hear you fine.
Oh, I don't know who said they couldn't hear me.
My husband said he must be the metal building he's in. So
sorry. So I was just putting a plug in for the smoke sensors. They have wind. There's 4 wind sensors. 3 are currently installed as well. So when we look at wind, whether it's on watch duty or windy app, whatever your wind app of choice is, that's a macro level. So we absolutely have access to specific location wind here in You Bet, which can vary significantly even just inside of our community. So that's another tool that we have available. Anybody else have any comments or thoughts that you guys want to share? Feedback?
This is Eric.
This is Terry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Terry, hold please. Eric, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the Lowell fire, and I'm sure most of you already know this, but it started down low, and that was during the day. So it was the wind was out of the southwest and came all the way up Chalk Bluff on that day. So it's it really just depends. And then the firemen, when I evacuated, I went to the fire whatever they call the command station or whatever, which was on Red Dog Road. And they were asking, what does the wind do at night? Is it typical where it comes downhill into the drainages? We were like, yeah, definitely. So, it does have the diurnal shift, right? So coming out of the, in general, in a regular summer day, out of the west or southwest or south during the day, and then downhill at night into the drainages.
That's super cool, Eric. And it's cool that the firefighters were asking you guys, locals, right? And that's something to remember, that if there's a fire here and we've got first responders in the area, they might not be from Nevada County even. They won't know. So that, they are going to ask those questions. That's a really great point. And the river fire was also originally southwest, and Chief Beerwagon, 40-something year chief from Peardale, he said it's the first time there's been a fire of any major concern that destroyed lots of homes coming from the southwest. So we can't exclude that, is also deadly. Terry, go ahead. You had a comment.
Yeah, it's kind of back to personal protection. So if you're staying to defend your property, or if, worst case, you're caught in the middle of a fire, that wool blanket is absolutely huge. Don't underestimate it. But the other thing is your clothing. If you're trying to fight protect your house, wear natural fibers, cotton or wool, because synthetics will burn and melt and injure you a whole lot more than those others will.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. And that's super important, because any sort of microfibers or synthetic fibers, what happens is it melts in the fire and then it burns and sticks to your skin. So that's why cotton and wool is recommended. And taking that one a step further, even recently, like the Courtney fires and so forth, a lot of those hit in the middle of the night. So what I tell everybody, you guys have been to my quarterly neighborhood leader meetings, I always say the best practice is keep a stack of clothing by your bedside during fire season. Don't laugh at me, but I'm like, don't worry about underwear and bras, girls. It's just put on the pants and pull on the long sleeve shirt, get your socks on and get your feet in a pair of boots and run. So, for me, that's what I do. I have a stack of stuff that I keep there. And when that first picture I opened with, when I said it was off my back deck, it was 10 o'clock in the morning that the trailer exploded on Loa Court. And, my heart pounds and my palms got sweaty and I didn't know what was happening. And I took a deep breath and first thing I said was, I should get dressed, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be any good to myself or anybody else. I ran in and put those things on. And while doing that, I was able to collect myself a little bit, but, yeah, have that, step one, step two, and stack of wool or cotton clothing is definitely first step. Other comments or questions?
Casey, you're talking about initial reactions to fires or what's going on, and I can empathize with what you're saying, because going back to the 49 fire, I have to say I was in panic mode, and the worst thing you can do is be panicking, because you don't make good decisions when you're in panic mode. And so to me, understanding fires, understanding wind, understanding what's going on really puts me at ease. So, because you know what's going on, it helps you make better decisions. So be informed, try to avoid panicking. Absolutely.
100% agree. And people ask me why I put all this time into leading Firewise and what I've done the last X years. And my choice was simple: move or learn about it and embrace it. And information is power. And so 100% agree, Juan. Encourage everyone to do that.
I got bad news for you. I'm
what's that,
panicked.
Terry?
I got bad news for you. I'm panicked just listening to this.
I'm sorry. I was hoping that understanding the options might help with, taking the steps toward preparation and figuring it out. But always leave early if you can, Terry. I mean, that's the bottom line.
No, and I appreciate all your work. I'm just kidding.
Okay. Well, I'm going to send out, like I said, I already have the checklist. I'm going to put the charts in it, and I'm calling it the You Bet Wildfire Survivability Handbook. So you can look to see that from me in the next whatever period of time, days, hopefully before I leave town. Get prepared, stay connected on radios or however works for you, and stay safe. And thank you for joining us. And thank you to Juan and Maureen for leading the way. Really appreciate that. Any further comments or sign-offs before we close?
This is Rich. I just want to thank you again, Casey, for putting all this together and the work you put into helping our community stay safe. It really is appreciated.
Thank you, Rich. And I appreciate all that you do too. It takes a village, and I tell everyone we have the best village in Nevada County.
Amen. Thank you, Casey. That was just terrific. And all the work you've been putting in that goes into making not only this presentation, but all of the events that you've organized. It's amazing. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's been a journey, and I feel blessed to be here with all of you guys. A lot. Love you guys. Stay safe. Talk soon.
Thank you,
Bye.
Kristen.
You're so
Bye.
well. Bye. You're so
Bye.
wel- Bye, guys.
Uh,